Right. So yeah, okay. Let's have a look at some of the questions on the exam. The pipe temperature one for sure. Okay. Um, and the other thing I wanted to touch upon was VPD. I want to make sure that you guys understand that as well. When we're talking about VPD, while I'm looking for that question, I want you to understand that we're talking about vapor pressure, right? So it's water in the air for sure, but we're talking about the pressure that the water vapor in the air exudes, right? It's not necessarily specifically about the water in the air. It's about the pressure that it's giving within the atmosphere, right? And we want to, that's important because that's going to affect the directive water flow through the plant. Okay, so you need to understand the conditions within the plant versus the conditions within the greenhouse environment. Um, and we need to know the humidity levels in the plant, which we assume are 100%. We need to know the temperature of the leaf because that's going to affect the amount of water that the air can hold within the leaf, which affects the pressure within the leaf itself, right? So that's an important part that a few missed. So I was looking for that specifically in a 5-mark question. I was looking for specific leaf temperature and the pressure within the leaf compared to the pressure outside the leaf. And growers can use that piece of information. Yes, they can figure out how to dehumidify their greenhouse with that information. However, we're looking at like steering the crop, getting nutrients to the ends of the foliage, moisture content within the plant itself, how much water is the plant taking up, that kind of stuff. So I want you guys to understand VPD and what it actually means. So pipe temperature. So here's the first one. Determine the pipe temperature influence in degrees Celsius when the following conditions are true. Okay, so outside temperature influence, that's what we're looking at, right? So outside temperature is 0. Our heat set point is 18 degrees Celsius. So there's a difference between the heating set point and the outside temperature of 18 degrees, right? And this right here is our influence, our influencer. Outside temperature influence is set to 1 degree. So this is our multiplier, okay? So if there's 18-degree difference between inside our set point and outside temperature, we're going to add 18 degrees Celsius to the pipe temperature, right? If this were set to 2, then it would be 18 times 2, so it'd be 36 degrees Celsius. We're going to add to the overall pipe temperature. Okay, so that's first half. Then the measured greenhouse temperature is 15 degrees Celsius, and our set point is 18. So we need to add heat to the greenhouse to get from 15 to 18. In order to figure that out, we have a proportional factor set at 4%. Okay, so there's a temperature difference of 3 degrees. So 3 degrees multiplied by 4%, 4% multiplied by 4. That's the 4, that multiplier is 4, which is going to give us 12 degrees added to the pipe temperature. Add them both together, you're going to get 30 degrees Celsius. Okay? All right. From that silence, I get everyone is okay. So that's with 2 pieces of influence. We go to the next question here, and now there's 3 influences on the pipe temperature. Okay, so determine the pipe temperature influence in degrees Celsius when the following conditions are true. Wind speed, 20 meters per second. Sorry, my phone is listening to me. Google is always listening. Sorry, wind speed, 20 meters per second. our influence or our multiplier is 1.5. So right there, if we're just taking this one alone, it's 20 times 1.5, which gives us 30 degrees Celsius. Okay. Now the sunlight intensity, we're assuming that it's a beautiful sunny day just like today, and we've met our maximum set influence that the sun can give, and we're going to reduce the temperature to the maximum amount, which is minus 15 degrees Celsius. Okay, so we take that 30 degrees that we're adding, we subtract 15 from it, so that gives us 15 degrees Celsius. Okay, now we have our PID, our proportional factor. So 20 degrees is our heating set point. 19 degrees is where we're at. So there's a 1 degree temperature differential with a proportional factor set to 5. 1 times 5 is 5. We're going to add that 5 to the 15, and we're going to get 20 degrees added to the overall to the pipe temperature. Okay, make sense? Maybe? Crickets?
How did you, sorry, Matt.
Yeah,
How did you get plus 15 in the first part? That's still blowing over me.
Okay, so the wind speed, we're going to get 30 overall, right? So 20 times 1.5 is going to give us 30 degrees Celsius added to the pipe temperature, okay?
Okay.
And then we're minusing the 15 from the sun.
Okay.
Okay. And then, yeah, you got it, Chad, 30 plus minus 15.
Cool.
Which plus the 5 gives us a lot. You weren't, anyway, that one was a struggled question, to say the least. I'm glad I made it only a 1-point question. So I hope that you guys understand that now, moving forward. Okay. In general, is a grower going to be looking at how much heat is added to the pipe temperature when they're walking through a greenhouse looking at the crop? Probably not, but you should have a good understanding within, as you're walking the crop, that the sun is out, it's cold outside on a wintry day, and the wind is blowing. There might be some influences on the greenhouse that you should be aware of, right? So when you're going back into the office and having a look at your settings and your graphs, you can have a look and look at it objectively. Anyway, moving on to the vent question. Maybe. There. So review the following settings and choose the correct vent position. Now, I didn't get into this with the lecture, so you kind of had to teach yourself on this one. So I hope that you guys understand. So if we look at, let's do the question first, and I'll go into the settings after. So the wind side vents will not open until the cooling requirements exceed 20%. Okay, so we're gonna stop the wind side vent from opening before the lee side, right? The wind blows into the greenhouse from the wind side. It'll cool the greenhouse down faster than it would if it were to blow over the greenhouse and blow the heat away from the greenhouse through the lee vent, right? So if we look at how the vents are opening, the peak of the greenhouse would be the lee side vent is opening first, the wind is coming through, the heat is coming up through the greenhouse and leaving and blowing that heat away. Rather than if the wind side vent was open, the wind would come straight into the greenhouse and then cool the greenhouse crop down directly, right? So we're trying to remove the heat rather than add the cool first and foremost. Also, when the wind is blowing strong, we want to prevent damage to the equipment itself, right? So we want the lee side vent to open up first to cool down the greenhouse as much as possible before we have to open the wind side. And I'll show you how to set that in the controls. The cooling set point is set at 23 degrees Celsius. The measured greenhouse temperature is set for 25 degrees Celsius. The P factor is set at 20%. Okay, so we're going to take the temperature difference and multiply it by 20. Quit on that one. Do I stop my phone from ringing? All these distractions. I'm easily distracted, by the way. So anyway, measured greenhouse temperature. So there's a difference between the set point and the measured greenhouse temperature. With our P factor set at 20%, we're going to need 20 times 2, which is 40. But our lee side vent is going to open to 40%. And the wind side isn't going to open until 20%, right? So at 20%, it's only going to be another 20% that it's going to be open. So it's always, the wind side is always going to be following the lee side, okay? That makes sense? Yeah, okay. Yeah, a lot of people chose either both vents are at 40% or both at 20. But hopefully now you'd get it. Is there any other question? Those were the 3 questions that I wanted to review just to make sure that everyone got them. And I did want to chat about VPD to make sure that everyone kind of understands, well, not kind of, but everyone understands what that term actually means. Okay, we're good with that. Cool. So we can look at the, so this is your Priva operator, the ventilation settings. And this is where we would set the lee side versus the wind side. You guys can see this, right? The Priva operator. I think I'm still sharing that screen. Cool. And percentage, so in this, our settings right here, the percentage at which to start opening the vents. So lee side is basically opening immediately. As soon as there's any cooling required, the lee side vent will open. Okay? The wind side vents won't open until there's 50% cooling required. Okay? And moving down, the percentage at which it's fully open. So the lee side vent will be fully open at 50% cooling. And the wind side will be, it'll take 100% cooling for the vents to be 100% open. We can set this higher. Oh, okay. Sorry, I think the other one you can set higher. Maybe I'm looking at the wrong portion. Percent at which, okay, anyway. So 50% cooling is 100% open. And then 100% cooling is 100% open. That's what this portion means. I thought we can go higher with the percentage at which it's open, meaning that if it was 150% cooling required, it would be 100% vent opening. Maybe that's down here somewhere. I don't know. I'm still trying to figure out where everything is in this operator. Sorry. Other vents positions, other vent settings that you should be concerned with. You can have minimum vent positions and maximum vent positions. Minimum vent positions would always keep the vent open at some point, right? So if it's warmer outside or for some reason you'd want some airflow all the time, you can set a minimum vent position of like 5 to 10%. And the maximum vent position, if it was freezing cold outside, you don't want those vents to open 100%. You can set that to whatever, 50% open. So regardless of how much cooling is required, it'll only open the maximum vent position. And the purge position, okay, so when we're setting our humidity levels and setting our purge, the vents are going to open and they're going to open to the position that we ask it to open for, or set it here in this the vent settings. Pete's asking, if the wind changes directions, do the vents quickly switch? That depends on how fast the wind is blowing and how long it has been blowing. It's not going to switch if it's like a 15 meter per second wind or airflow outside, and it switches for like 10 seconds, because it's going to swirl. Wind is going to swirl at the bottom of the escarpment here. But if we get sustained winds of 50 meters per second and it switches, and it's going to usually going to stick around for a little while, it doesn't immediately switch back and forth. It's going to take a little bit of time, and that can be set in the configuration of the vents. So I can have a look at where that would be set, but yeah, minimum time for wind lee switch. So it's set for 15 seconds or 15 seconds here, sorry. And minimum wind speed for wind lee switch. So here it's set for 5 meters per second. I'd probably have that a little more, like maybe 20. So as soon as it hits 20, we're going to switch the wind in the lee side. Majority of the time, our wind comes from the west, right? Prevailing winds are west in North America. That means the wind is coming from west and moving east. So the wind side vent will be on the west side of the greenhouse, or the that field side if you're looking at the greenhouse. And the lee side would be the brewery side of the greenhouse. Okay, so that's those are the vents that are pointing away from the wind. The vents decide how we decide the percentage of open the vents will be is on the PID. Okay, so the proportion, integral, and derivative factors will determine how open those vents are according to the cooling requirements of the greenhouse. Similarly to the the heating portions. Vent position is determined by time, and there are vent sensors. The vent sensors are not as reliable as the time set. These are just kind of indicators. You can have position meters that kind of act like a radio volume dial. So at 0 volume, it'd be 0% all the way around. And as the vents open, that volume control will open with it and measure the resistance across that sensor to determine the vent position. Those sensors fail on a regular basis, so we set time for vents to open. And how you do that is you'd put the vents fully closed. Then you would manually open with a stopwatch. You would time them to open, and you'd set the amount of time that it takes to open, right? So say if it takes 100 seconds for the vent to open, 10% cooling would be 10% open. The vents would open for 10 seconds, okay? So that's how we know that. Anyway, before we get into the weeds on that. So any questions on vents? I know I went over that quickly. But I think I covered the most important parts. Cool. So no more questions on the exam or the vents, right? Okay. So curtain control, we'll get into curtains. I've posted a lecture or a lesson or whatever, a PowerPoint to Blackboard. where to put these floating heads. So hopefully you had a chance to review that because I want to go over the settings and how we set the curtains and lighting. So what can we use curtains in the greenhouse for before I get into that? What kind of things do we use the curtains for? Shade? Yeah, absolutely. Anything else?
Controlling temperature and humidity.
Yep, yep, yep. So we can use the energy curtains for keeping the heat in, as Pete says, and I think that was Keelan that says controlling heat and humidity. Yes, you can definitely control the humidity with curtains.
You might have blackout curtains.
I think that's what Sean was trying to say, 12 and 12, maybe photo period. Corey, maybe, yeah, absolutely. But you're right, photo period control. Stop far red. So yeah, more shading, absolutely. Manipulating the crop. So these are good. That's good. I'm glad you're starting to think about strategies. And that's what we're here for, right? That's what this course should be related on, strategies and how to manipulate the environment. Anything I missed on the curtains? Open the curtains in the morning to let cold air pockets above the curtains down onto the crop. Sure, yeah, I guess you can use that as kind of a shock to the plant material, right? Use that as your dip in the morning. Absolutely. Good, 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 good. I've also posted a link to a quick seminar that Riva put on for light abatement bylaws that has curtains in there. So as greenhouses are installing lights, especially down in Leamington and Kingsville, night is becoming day, and these lights are definitely overcoming the night. So there's bylaws now. I think they were put in beginning of. Oh, they're set to put it. They're set for April. I think April 1st is the first day of the bylaw. So growers are scrambling now to figure out how to control the environment under the curtains because they have to light. If they have to light, they have to block the light from leaving the greenhouse. This little webinar was a pretty decent video. There's about 40 to 50 minutes of the hour and 20 that it is that we're talking about how the curtains work and the settings. So if you have a chance, if you haven't already, please watch that. It's very valuable information. It talks about everything from the type of curtains to use to how to set the curtains at night, position your gaps, and how to dehumidify with curtains. Have a look at that, please. All right, so having a look at the Priva operator, which you guys can play around with. I really don't like these graphs. You can't really manipulate them at all. I was trying to change even the color. You can't change the colors of the. Anyway, I'm not going to complain. We have something that you can play with, so that's a good thing. So curtain levels, you can have a look at the graph to see your curtain levels. The positions right now are at 90%. So we'll have a look. Percentage. So this red line here is the curtain position. I did a manual override just to play around with it. And it went down to 75%. It went back up to, or sorry, it went back up to 90. Okay, so when you're looking at things like lights or curtains or even fan states, you're going to see these straight lines and then complete like drop-offs to their set points. When you're looking at temperatures in the graph, you're going to look at more of a flow to the lines. But the curtains are static, right? They don't change for a period of time. That's why these lines are always straight. Or you can have a look at the state of the curtains as well. The state's usually open or closed. And in the digital world, that is usually determined by a number, right? Whether that's a 0 or a 1. We have different numbers to define different, titles or positions that the vents might be in because of manual override or something like that. When you're looking at the graphs, understanding why what they mean is important. The status of the curtains, pretty straightforward. The current position now in the Priva office is 90% for curtain 1. For curtain 2, so the Priva operator controls up to 2 curtains. There can be more curtains in a greenhouse, especially now, because we have to stop the light from leaving the greenhouse. We can have multiple greenhouses, and the curtains would overlap in different directions. Right? We can have a blackout that goes completely over, or we can have energy or shade curtains that would overlap each other. So you can have up to 3 or 4 curtains in one greenhouse. So yeah, that's the status. Each curtain will look at temperatures because we can control the curtains through energy savings, right? So we'll close the curtains based on either outside temperature or what the greenhouse temperature difference would be. And these temperatures sensors are the curtains looking at, you can specify the temperature sensor for the curtain to look at if there are more than one or multiple sensors within the greenhouse. If the default usually will be the ambient air temperature of the greenhouse, which is in that bird box or the aspirated screen. That's what this temperature is looking at. Okay. Moving on to the settings. So the first, there we go. The first few boxes here are set for energy savings. Okay, and the energy curtains says night start time, but you can start this at any time throughout the day. So what time do you want the curtains your energy curtains to come across? Or what time do you want these energy saving curtains to cover your crop? Okay, so night start time, that's what that means. Okay, so this is in the 24-hour clock, which that's 10 to 5. And remember what this arrow means, right? That's following sundown. I don't know why you'd want to follow sundown when you're, oh, sorry, I'm confusing myself. Disregard that. So yeah, we're following sundown. So at 10 to 5, every night, the curtains are going to close. And we're going to, at this point in time, we're going to gain time every day. Night end time. So what time do you want the curtains to uncover? All right, we're going to follow sunrise. So curtain 1, curtain 2. Minimum outside temperature is set for 18 degrees. So anything under 18 degrees, the curtains will cover at night. So you might want to set this a little lower. I guess if your set point is 18 degrees, you'd be closing as soon as the temperature falls, or if this was set at 18 and your heating set points were set at 18, then the temperature or the curtains would close regardless of the temperature at night. Right? So anything below this, the curtains will close. Night position is 100%. Okay. If you want to leave a gap, you can leave a gap to allow for air exchange from above the curtain to below the curtain. But usually you'll have that set to 100%. Maximum night position during purging or when your vents are open. So we're going to drop down to 5% uncovered or 95% covered if we're venting. If the vents open, then the curtains will claw back 5%. So as the curtains are closing, it's usually at sundown. So we're gaining all this energy as the day goes on from the sun. And if we close the curtains, what's going to happen to that energy in the greenhouse? Is that energy going to immediately leave if we cover the curtain, if we cover the crop with curtains? Or is it going to hover around? Yeah, energy is going to get trapped within the greenhouse, right? And the greenhouse is going to heat up, right? The curtains are made, the energy curtains are made with aluminum, right? They're reflective material woven within the curtain itself. So you use aluminum foil to bake potatoes, right? So that's going to keep the heat in. So all that radiant heat that's bouncing around in the greenhouse is now going to bounce back into the greenhouse instead of leaving through the vents or the glass. So that greenhouse, your greenhouse is actually going to heat up a little bit, right? So we can add a -2 degrees there, okay? Or we can add temperature if you wanted to for some reason. If we drop our heating set point down by 2 degrees, the idea is the heating pipes in the greenhouse wouldn't add heat to the greenhouse as well as the sunlight, right? We want to reduce our temperature before the curtains close to accommodate for the energy gain when we close our energy curtains. Conversely, in the morning, we have all this, I think I have. Now, do you see the graphic that I've got up? Okay. So in the morning, with our curtains covered, we have all this cold air on top, right? So what we want to do is to kind of combat the cold air that's going to drop on the crop as you open the curtains. We're going to heat the greenhouse up, okay? So prior to the curtains open, we're going to heat up the greenhouse to whatever temperature we think is going to benefit that. There we go. So that night end heating adjustment, we can add a couple of degrees there. So I don't know, 5 degrees might be too much. 2 degrees. So if we add 2 degrees to the greenhouse just before the curtains open, we'll kind of mitigate that cold air coming from the above the curtains. Crack position. So how much are we going to open our curtains or uncover our curtains as the morning comes? So at first thing, So at whatever time in the morning, let's say 6 in the morning, our curtains start to uncover. What's going to happen is the curtains are going to open up 2%, uncover 2%, allow some mixing of the cold air come down from the above the curtains to the warm air below, allow it to mix a little bit. The sensors are going to figure out what's going on in the greenhouse itself. And if everything is okay, after minimum crack duration of, I think that's 5 minutes. After 5 minutes, we're going to open up another 3% to 95%. Okay. Allow a little more of that air to mix. Sensors will indicate if everything is okay in the greenhouse. If we're cooling down too quickly, we're falling within the range, we're going to open up to a full uncover the crop 10%. And then again, allow air mixing, so on and so forth. So we're going to open the curtains in the morning in stages to allow the mixing of the cold air with the warm air of the greenhouse to occur. Okay. If at any point in time the greenhouse gets too cold, so say we move from crack position 1 to crack position 2 here. So 5% uncovered, the greenhouse all of a sudden gets way too cold. After our minimum or a maximum crack duration, so after 20 minutes, the greenhouse is not warming up or it's not at the set point, we're going to close the curtains back to 98%. Okay. And then we're going to start the whole process over again. Wait another 5 to 20 minutes and then open up until until the temperatures are satisfied. Then we'll uncover the rest of the 90%. Okay. So we can go up or back down at any point in time based on the duration, the time limits.
Just a question about the position. So if it kept doing that over and over again, say it kept trying to open and it was too cold and then tried to shut again. If it did that a lot, like consistently, would you then raise the temperature instead of like adding 2 degrees, you could add like 5 degrees in preparation?
Yeah, you can definitely add more temperature here. Or if you remember, we can also go back to the mixing valves and use curtain influence. Okay, and we can increase this number here. Okay, we can add instead, I don't know what the maximum is, 200%. That's why this number is 150. So our proportional value, our outside temperature, if we're adding 10 degrees based on this information, when our curtains are uncovering, we're going to add 15 degrees, right? We're going to add 150%. So we can increase this number, or yes, you're absolutely right, Emily, we can have a look at the curtains and increase the compensation, I guess. We can increase that number there.
And then if you increased both, what happens then?
Yeah, then your pipe temperature might get too high, but I don't. Yeah, navigating this is a little different. I'm still getting used to it. Valves. In here. Your absolute water temperature will come into effect, right? You don't want that water temperature going over 99 degrees or 100 degrees, but I guess under pressure you can go up to 110, but you should have an absolute maximum water temperature. You can set that here, but there's an actual Anyway, you're going to get an absolute pipe temperature, and yeah, so five degrees here plus another 150 or 200% cooling that'll keep adding to the pipe temperature. Now, if it's still too cold, at some point the curtains are going to open regardless, right? So our maximum crack duration will wait 20 minutes. And if it exceeds that 20 minutes, it's not going to go to the next step until we're absolutely satisfied.
Okay.
If the temperature doesn't get up to where it needs to be at that point, then we need to look at, hey, what's going on with our boiler system? You know, is there something else going on that we need to figure out? Maybe our boilers aren't at capacity. Maybe there's something wrong with them. Our mixing valves aren't opening. You know, our pipe temperatures say that they're 90 degrees, but you feel them and they're really cold. So there might be something going on there, right? So there might be something actually damaged that's not right, right? We got to figure something out there. It is rare that would occur. Like maybe your vent is stuck open or something like that. Good questions. I like that you're thinking. Okay, so that's how the curtains operate when they're covering for energy conservation. Does Preview usually catch stuff when things are broken? No, they won't tell you that your vents are broken. They're assuming that they're working. So we have alarms set in place to tell us when things are, to look at stuff. So if the temperature is falling for no reason, then you're going to have a walk out in your greenhouse and you're going to have a look. You're going to see your vents stuck open, or you're going to see your mixing valves not working right. Your boiler needs to be reset, something like that. So we're going to look at kind of the effect of the cause to tell us that there's something wrong with our equipment. There are, like I said, on the vents position meters that may tell us that a breaker has tripped on the vent. That's kind of a fail-safe for that. Like I get vent alarms all the time in this greenhouse because our breaker trips. So yeah, there are things I guess you can put on the equipment to tell you, but your alarms within Priva are set to usually temperature. Yeah, a little bit. So there are going to be some things going on under the curtain during the night when the curtains are covered, right? So our plants are growing. That doesn't stop. The heat is still generating. That doesn't stop. How do we mitigate humidity under a curtain? Are there ways that you guys can think of that we can tackle high humidity levels?
There was that cool fan thing that went in between the curtains.
Absolutely.
I forget what that's called.
The Hanova ventilation jet, or there's nivelators, or the vertical fans, right? So they look like this. I put a link in your on your Blackboard to this website. These are kind of cool. They will bring the air from above the curtains down into the greenhouse itself. So you see there's the main vertical fan right here. And then inside the bigger fan, there's a smaller fan. And these are actually set on multiple speeds, variable speed fans. So when the curtains are closed, this fan operates based on the temperature and humidity levels in the greenhouse. So these are pretty cool, right? So curtains are open. This fan here will circulate the air. And when the curtains are closed, this fan turns on and this fan turns on to circulate the air. It's kind of neat. Other ways that we can tackle that. So not everybody can afford, new fans for a greenhouse. This greenhouse still has horizontal airflow fans, and we do tackle humidity levels when they do get too high. So we can crack or gap the vents or the curtains, right? We can gap those curtains if the humidity levels get too high, which allow for some air exchange from above the curtain to below, right? All that hot, humid air accumulating in the greenhouse. This is a challenge. There we go. So all that hot, humid air is collecting in the greenhouse. We gap it and we have some air exchange, right? Other ways to combat it, different materials of curtains will have different makeup of material of curtains will have different materials within it, which will allow for air exchange. Some of the newer curtains have yarn in them. So that yarn will absorb some of the moisture and evaporate from the below to above, right? So we can have some air exchange that way. Most energy curtains will be made so that we'll have some air exchange through them. What those numbers are, you can look up. But for our purposes, we're just going to say that we're going to have some air exchange from below to above, as long as there's energy down here, right? There's more energy down in the heated greenhouse than there is above the curtains, right? So this is cool, dry air, and this is warm, moist air. So diffusion occurs, right? From high energy states to lower energy states. We're going to get some airflow all the time from below the curtains to above the curtains. We're going to get some air exchange, maybe not enough, but we're always going to get some, right? As long as there's a large temperature difference from above to below. If this, a lot of the newer greenhouses now will have sensors below the curtains and sensors above the curtains. Ours doesn't, so we have to make an assumption that it's always cooler up here. But if these temperatures start to equalize and you have a sensor above the curtains, we can open the vents, cool down this area, and have some more air exchange coming up. Okay, so there's ways that we can play around with the settings to maximize the temperature difference, so you can have some airflow pushing through the curtains, right? If you think back to the Moliere diagram, the absolute humidity, all that fun stuff, how much plants will transpire on a regular basis at rest. Does anyone know that number off the top of their noodle? I think it's about 50 grams of water per square meter for something like a vine crop or a vegetable crop at rest. So if there's no sun or lights, so plants are transpiring as long as there's available moisture and the temperatures are sufficient at about 50 grams per meter per hour. So that's pumping a lot of moisture below the curtains, right? So that those plants are just pumping water into the air at a regular basis. So as long as we are below, the absolute humidity is below that 50 grams per square meter per hour, we're going to have some air exchange. We're going to have some moisture exchange, right? That moisture is going to build up above the curtain, land on the glass above, right, and condense. That water is going to flow down and be caught in that little V channel, that drip line below the gutter, and basically outside the greenhouse, right? So the windows, the glass windows will create an air drying effect, right? So the cold air outside, the cold air above the curtains, with the warm air going above the curtains, some exchange. We're always going to have a drier condition above the curtains, which is going to pull the warm, moist air up above the curtains. That's not always 100% efficient. So that's where gapping your curtains comes into play. So do that while you can. And I'm not sure about the bylaws coming in, but I think Kingsville and Leamington are acting a little differently from each other. I think, I can't remember which one, it doesn't matter, but one of them is allowing up to 10% gap overnight. So that's at least a possibility. If you can't gap your curtains, then you're going to need one of those fancy fans that I showed you. This guy. Okay, so there are strategies that you can play around with to mitigate some of those challenges below the curtains during the night. So during the day, shading, we can set up our curtains. Right now, there's nothing going on. We have no shading levels whatsoever. But if we do have shade curtains, which are made slightly different, well, they're made differently than energy curtains. They will not have the aluminum strips through them. And they're made just to shade the crops. So you want to select the amount of conditions, shading conditions, or shading levels. You can set that here. You can have, I think it's 1 to 5. So the more levels that you have set, the more conditions have to be met, and the curtains will cover the crop in stages rather than one foul swoop. Right, so you can control the shade curtains based on sunlight or temperature or both. So if we have sunlight and temperature to control the curtains, then the sunlight levels have to be at a certain point for the curtains to start covering, right? So say you want the curtains to cover right when the sun comes out, so 50 watts per meter squared. So from 0 to 50, there'll be no shade, right? So the curtains will be completely open. At level 1, you can have this set for, I don't know, 75. So at 75 watts per meter squared, you're going to have the curtains cover, I don't know, 10%, right? You can set this temperature up as well to 18 degrees and move onward and upward from there, okay? So as the sunlight level increases, your shade percentage level will increase. And conversely, when it falls back, say we have a cloudy day and the clouds stay over the curtains or the greenhouse for an extended period of time, then the curtains will open or uncover. That's pretty straightforward, right? When it's sunny outside, the curtains shade. If it's warm outside, curtain shade. Advanced settings. So if it's windy or it's raining, you can have your curtains cover or uncover the crop based on those conditions. In a typical Venlo, small vent style greenhouse, this isn't really a huge factor. But if you did have large, peak vents, this could definitely play a role. Same with a large gutter vent on a poly greenhouse. So the larger the vent, the more that this would come into play. Or you can have greenhouses if you're lucky enough to live in a tropical climate without glass. You can have something like a Cravo greenhouse that's just basically curtains. And if you wanted your crop to be irrigated by rain, you would have a sensor out there. You would uncover the crop when it's raining outside. So that type of stuff. Okay. So to prevent damage to the curtains, if you have a large vent, then you would change these settings. So uncover the curtain if it's over 40 meters per second. So if it's windy, you might want to uncover the crop or uncover the curtain. So to protect the curtain. And this one doesn't have a rain sensor. Okay, the other one does. So, sorry. And wind can pick up. So we want undelayed wind for 30 seconds or whatever, a minute, 5 minutes, whatever time you set here. So it has to be not windy for that period of time for the curtains to come into effect. Configuration of the curtains. So just like vents, the curtains are based off of time. Okay, so you configure your curtains based on how long it takes for the curtain to cover. Right? So you'll set the curtain to completely uncovered, manually override it to cover, and you get your stopwatch out and time the amount of time it takes for the curtains to open. Further down in the configuration, you'll have your curtain delay time. And this is based off of different types of motors. Okay, so if you have a single phase motor, for instance, those motors take a couple seconds to kick in after they've got a signal to do so. So we are down to the second to figure out when the curtains open and close. To prevent damage to the drive, we will put a delay in if there is a delay in the motor. If there's no delay in the motor, then don't worry about this setting at all. Again, this is usually up to a technician or an installer that would set these, right? But if you notice, your drive shaft is breaking all the time, it might be because you need to put a delay in the motor. If there wasn't a delay, for instance, your motor would keep on trying to open or uncover or cover the crop and driving that cable around the drive shaft and eventually cracking it. So that's there to prevent. And that could be a couple of seconds, right? It can only take a couple seconds of pressure to break it. And also configuration of temperatures. For some reason, if you wanted to change what your curtains are looking at, you can change the sensor that your curtains are looking at. So rather than air temperature, you can have a localized sensor that might be dedicated to the curtain itself. Outside temperature, for some reason you might want the outside temperature to dictate what your curtains are doing. Most greenhouses will be defaulted to the bird boxes, those aspirated screens, the dry bulb temperature. So that is your curtain settings. nothing special there, nothing out of the ordinary. Does anyone have any questions on that, on how to set your curtains? Any discussion points? Any talk about what's going on in Leamington?
Well, that's kind of funny that if they're going to have two different bylaws, will that sort of change the type of crops people grow where?
Well, yeah, Kingsville and Leamington. I just think they're the same bylaw, but I think they're going to have like addendums to the bylaw, right? So I forget which one is which. Probably Leamington because they have more greenhouses. Um, will allow a little bit of a gap, whereas Kingsville will not. No, I doubt they'll change their crops.
They'll just be more expensive if they have to install the fans if
Yeah.
they're not allowed to have a gap.
That's right.
So would they?
Yeah, lighting in general, lighting in the veggie world is a newer thing in general anyway, but those who have installed lights, spent some millions on doing it, will probably be a little frustrated with this bylaw. But there are ways that they can play around with this, right? It's definitely going to affect how the greenhouse reacts. Yeah, Angela lives in Leamington. She says that lights are in Leamington and Kingsville are super bad. You can't see the stars. Yeah, that's too bad because there's not a lot of city out there, right? But anyway, definitely something has to be done for sure. So if you think about what the conditions are when you close the curtains, not only the humidity will increase and build. It's I don't know if I have. Anyway, I'm coming back to this graphic because I like to draw when I'm teaching, and I can't draw on anything here. Anyway, so the conditions when the curtains are covered and the lights are on. So pretend you have lights here and they're on. What happens when the lights are on? Not only does light give off light, what else does it give off?
Gives off heat.
Yeah, it gives off a lot of heat, right? Quite a bit too. When you have 1,000-watt bulbs and you have thousands of lights in the greenhouse, your environment is going to be completely different, right? So typically, when the crop is uncovered, the plants are growing actively, so they're transpiring. We have heating pipes below, right? We have rail pipes below the crop. That's where we get the majority of our heat from, right? So you're always going to have airflow or heat building up below the crop, heating up the roots, right? And keeping top of the plants cool, which they like, right? They like warm feet, cool heads, right? So we're always going to get a buildup of heat down here, and it's going to mitigate it or make its way up through the greenhouse and cool off as it goes and out, right? So when the lights are on, the curtains are covered, that total opposite is happening, right? We're going to get heat from above. Our greenhouse temperature isn't going to change, right? Our sensors are still going to be in the greenhouse and say, oh, it's keeping up in here. It's warm, whatever. But the heat generated is going to come from the top, and it's going to be pushed down, right? Which turns off our bottom heat, and we're going to have an opposite effect. So we're going to have hot heads and cool feet, which the plants don't particularly like, right? So growers are still trying to keep the heat. This is where your minimum pipe temperature would come into play if you think about the pipe temperatures and reasons why we'd want to keep a minimum pipe temperature, because we want to keep that airflow going up as well, right? So the only way we can combat that is gapping the greenhouse or the curtains when the lights are on. That's the only way that we have now to do that. Or we have to keep this really, really cool up here, to force that airflow through. So until we get better materials for curtains, we have to get those fans. Right? So yeah, Emily, definitely it's going to cost those growers a little bit of money to use the lights. And I guess it comes down to, are the lights worth having on at that point? Right? Are we getting that much more production to keep the lights on than to turn them off?
Yeah, because
I
now
don't-
it'll require your lights and fans and curtain. So it's not just light costs.
That's right.
Yeah, that's crazy.
So this is a relatively new feature, right? So lights on, curtain closed. It's relatively new. I know Priva has there's not even a setting in the old Priva controls. There is now. They've just put it in as a revision. You probably have to pay for an update. That states when the lights are on, the curtains are closed based on this time. So you can set that in a custom, but yeah, it's times are changing there for sure. So we're gonna have to learn how to play around with the environment below. Yeah, I don't know, side vents. I've seen some newer styles of greenhouses with the posts having holes in the top of the post, bring the air from above the curtain to below. I don't know how well that works, but those fans are probably your best bet. What else? You say about which one I'm sharing. There we go. Okay, so again, that's pretty straightforward for the curtains. Lighting is even easier to control. Are the lights on or off? Pretty much, right? And what time do you want them to come on, right? So their start time. So if we get into lights, we want to use our lights, great, yep, perfect. What time do we want to use our lights from and until? Okay, so you can have your lights set on a time, or you can have them set for supplementation, right? So if it's winter, our winters here in Ontario are usually pretty cloudy and dim. So if the outside light or the sunlight drops below a certain point, say they drop below 100 watts per meter squared, the lights are going to turn on. Okay, anything above 100 watts per meter squared, lights will turn off. Okay, and there's two settings here. So if we set that, it's kind of like a dead band of 100 watts per meter squared. So from 0 to 100, the lights will be on, and the lights will stay on until it hits 200 watts per meter squared, then they'll turn off. Okay, so that's supplemental light. If you're lighting at night, doesn't matter. You're just looking at the time it starts and the time it finishes. Reset accumulation. So we can measure the energy coming off the PPFD coming off the lights or the joules coming off the lights, and we can extrapolate that over time, and the computer will actually accumulate. They'll add the PPFD as time goes on, and we can turn off the lights as soon as it hits, I don't know, 5,000 joules per centimeter squared, right? So again, if you think of the light as a photon of light as a water droplet, and the sensors are a bucket of collecting the water droplet, as soon as that bucket is filled, the lights will turn off. Okay, so if you're doing something, you're calculating DLI, for instance, that's where this would come into play. So if your plants have received enough light, the lights will turn off, and you can set that up in here. Again, lights generate heat. So we can lower the pipe temperatures when the lights are on, or lights promote growth in the plant. We can add heat to the heating pipes to manipulate the plants to grow. Right? Temperature and light go hand in hand when plants are growing. So lights are on. We want to make sure that there's heat to the greenhouse. We can set a minimum pipe temperature. So we can influence the environment based off of lights. Okay, so this is a basically if and then statement. So if the lights are on, then we can set a minimum pipe temperature in all periods set to 25 degrees Celsius. So regardless of the needs of the greenhouse, the minimum temperature the pipes will be 25 degrees. Okay. If they need to be more than that, then they can be more than that. No problem. Make sense? Lights are pretty straightforward. So in order to get the PPFD, the amount of joules required, you're going to have to take a measurement and add that into the configuration below, right? So how many watts or how many joules are given off, how many watts per second are given off by the light? You can add that here. Okay. So I don't know, like 80 at crop level, 80 watts per meter squared at crop level. 1,000, I don't know, whatever the lights are given off, that's what they will be calculated at per second for this accumulation up here. Configuring the lights. So if the lights turn on, they'll be on for at least this set amount of time. You don't want those lights cycling or else you're going to blow up your bulbs. Okay, so for at least 20 minutes, those lights will stay on. You can set this for whatever time you want. Any questions on light and how to use them? Again, pretty straightforward, right? Cool. Well, curtains and lights, that's all I got for this week. Okay, so get on the Priva operator, play around with the settings, please. Have a look at so this webinar, it's got a lot of great information. You'll learn what a Dutch accent is for sure, because it's all Dutch people talking. But they have very good information. So watch that and have a look at the PowerPoint that I've set out. Quiz will be on Friday. I'll set the quiz based off of the information given on the today on the lesson and as well as the PowerPoint. I may pull in a bonus question or something out of this webinar. Okay, that's all I got. You guys have a wonderful week. I'll see some of you in the next few days. Crops class and in veg class. Until then.
Have a good one, Matt. Thanks for the lesson.
Bye.
You.
These awkward leaving moments.